What is going on, everybody? It is Daryl from Just Roll It Already, and welcome to another Blank D20 segment. This time, I am talking about when I created dark settings. People often want to know how to make a game dark. It's kind of one of those genres that people have a hard time doing because they don't know exactly how to make one believable. Now, my advice to you, those who would be a would-be dark gaming world gamer or game master, you should look no further than our own society. Any society for that matter. You take a look at any point of human history, and it is incredibly dark. It is incredibly horrible. We would backstab each other. We would exploit each other. We would take advantage of a situation regardless of how dark and grimace it could be. I mean, take a look at people who war profiteer. People who would, during a time of crisis, hijack food supplies and then sell it at ridiculous high prices to those in need. Now, let's take this into a game scenario. I came up with a world a while ago. My friends wanted me to run a dark game for them, and they were forewarned about it because I am known to make very brutal dark games that players were often disturbed. I created a world that was been destroyed by a disease created by a person called the Queen of Pestilence. She wanted nothing more than destruction of society and thought everyone was nothing more than a thieving rat destroying the planet or the world itself, taking and not giving back enough. So she decided to do nature a favor by eliminating as much as possible before her untimely demise. This disease would go out and infect large cities. And if you didn't know, a long time ago in cities, when a disease started, it was very scary and people freaked out about it. It was pretty hard for them to get their minds around how a disease worked. But this was a supernatural disease that would cause people to go crazy. Not exactly horribly feral, but they were insane. Their skins would be covered in rashes and boils, and it would be deformed, and it was kind of like it didn't look like it wasn't zombification exactly, but they were alive and could be killed just about as easily as anyone else, except if they got any of their bodily fluid on you, like their boils popping on you or something, then you'll be a problem. But that was the general part of it. But the game that I created would take place in a large megacity, if it were. It was a fortress city that was on the side of a lake that had large walls and a middle terrace that would rise up way above any feasible thing for defense. But it became into the last city in the world in this country that could actually stand against it. Now, taking the real world examples, we had the 3 tiers of what the city was like. There was the high rise, or the upper terrace. Then there was the midtown, which was still behind some feasible defensible walls. And then there was the slums, which were often, as you may guess, were all the people who were not so fortunate to end up in. People up in the upper terrace were actually rich aristocracies, people who were noble, people who had connections, people who had power, and they would flaunt their power, and they would keep themselves away from the sickness, the poor, or destitute, and make them work for them to get what they want, to live life of comforts, regardless of the fact that the world outside was hell. The people in the middle town, they were not exactly in comfort, but they weren't exactly in discomfort either. They just didn't have access to as many resources as the upper people did, but they often would serve the upper people. And then below that were the people who got crapped all over, which were the slum dwellers. This is where most of the party was. These people would be sent out into pretty much suicidal jobs to gather resources in the world from outside of the safety of the walls to bring them back in. They would go out and get lumber. They would go out and farm. They would go out and do fishing jobs. They would get anything to ensure the survival of the city. They were told by everyone that as long as they worked and as long as they contributed to the city, that they were welcome to stay. But what they didn't know is they were practically slaves. And they were always kept in line in fear by the plague doctors. Now, what the plague doctors did is they would look over people and they would choose people out based on what they would perceive as a sign of the sickness. They would either cast them out of the city, or if they resisted, they used these long pole arms that they would cut, which spout fire out like alchemist fire, and burn people to death in the street. This was kind of like a witch hunt. This was people living in fear, and by exploiting the fear, they were able to keep them in line and keep the populace under control because it was, again, dark. This is what people actually would do, is when they were afraid, they would often act irrationally. I observe people a lot, so also looking at history, you can understand how it would work. So by keeping these people in the lower areas in check, the middle people were often okay, being served and being able to offer services to the upper people and sometimes lower, but the party often had to deal with this crap. It was an interesting endeavor, and when they all played in it, they turned their heads slowly towards me and called me a monster of the fact that they witnessed a kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth to say this, but when they witnessed a child being burned to death because he was trying to run. And he was actually not sick because the party did not know is that the neighbor kid, who was a horrible, horrible boy, by the way, said that he had the marks of the disease, and when the boy tried to run away because he was scared, they caught him and killed him. And the party was horrified by that fact, and anybody who would see kids getting killed, that is messed up. But fear often also in dark games can show what it's like. Sometimes giving hope when there is none can be the worst thing that could possibly happen in a dark game. Sometimes it's a reprieve, but also people will exploit that kind of kind nature in those games. A dark game is a game that you literally are distrustful of your fellow man. You don't really believe everything that goes on. Just because they say that there is gold at the end of the rainbow, it's not. Just because they say that there is a way for them to find a cure to a sickness doesn't mean they're always going to be. Sometimes it's just out for numero uno. It's not really a good world to be in. It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's really anybody who would fight each other over scraps of bread because they are hungry. It is the rich exploiting the weak, the strong defeating, pushing down the destitute. It's just anything that you can see in this world that goes on. Take a look at warlords in our world. You don't need to go anywhere except the news to find out this stuff. You can look at history and how things unfolded. You got to understand how things and events happen. Desperation often breeds fear. And also a will to actually just do anything. Anyways, if there's any other methods that you think that I've missed when it comes down to creating a dark game, don't be afraid to tell me. If you guys enjoyed it, thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment, anything else. If you guys have anything that you want me to talk about, just don't be afraid to say anything. Anyways, I am Daryl. I will see you guys later.